Piers Morgan. We got Piers Morgan, the person who I don't know. He wavers whether he wants to be left, he wants to be based or not. Dave Smith, who's I don't know. He's trying to figure his shit out. It's like, bro, I picked Trump, but at the same time, Trump is invading all these countries. That's not okay. The Free Press. So I don't know who this guy is. We'll see if he's based or not. Kyle Kulinski, known progressive. Michael Knowles, a closeted gay Republican who, who like is like has the kind of psychopath smile. Um, he is a very good MAGA soldier. All right, let's dive into it. What's good, Austin? Pray for Sudan, y'all. I'm not sure what in particular. Is there something happening in Sudan? I'll be honest, I do not keep up with a lot of international politics as much because America has so much crazy shit going on. But I only know like surface level stuff, so to speak.
Welcome back to Uncensored.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on. You know, I decided to have a week off after Christmas. Big mistake. Never have a week off in the Trump administration. It seemed like all hell was breaking loose. And yet, if you park the rhetoric, which can be very incendiary on all sides, and you cut to the...
All right, are we about to cape for Donald Trump right off rip? Come back after all the Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens stuff and start caping for Trump? Right off start?
Presumed ideology of what Trump is trying to do here. I do see the argument. I may not agree with
Base, of course you do. When in doubt, support your best friend.
With all of it, but I see the logic of what he's trying to do and why he thinks it's in America's interest, and that applies to whether...
Yes, take over another country just for their oil. Base. W imperialism.
Whether it's Venezuela and getting rid of Maduro, or whether it's the Iran situation, and so on. Do you see the logic, even if you don't agree with it all?
No.
Okay.
I mean, no, I mean, Piers, it's as you said, you know, Donald Trump can say America first means whatever I say it means, but if America first meant one thing to everybody who's ever uttered the phrase, and then he wants to change that to mean America first means regime changes all around the world, huge, enormous, unthinkable bloated defense budgets like he just requested from Congress. And if he's going to think that none of his supporters are going to have a problem with that, or that they're all just going to change their views because he decided to change his, I think he's going to find out how well that works for him in the midterms this year. And I think it's going to be a disaster. And, you know, obviously it's true, Piers, as you said, and we all know Donald Trump will say all types of crazy things and then never follow through with that. But he also just asked Congress for a $1.5 trillion defense budget. And that to me does indicate that he is anticipating a real deal war coming up, or at least the possibility of it. And if he means the things that he says, I mean, I don't exactly know how you do that. I don't know how you say we run Venezuela and we'll dictate who the next regime is and we'll dictate where the oil goes without at least an effort of like 100,000 troops. I'm not even sure that would be enough to do it. So it's unclear what exactly the next move is going to be, and that's really when we'll find out what he's going to do. But no, Piers, the idea that we're 38 or maybe 39 by the end of the show trillion dollars in debt right now. We have major problems in this country, and we have a hot war raging on in Europe, which is a proxy war between the entire West and the biggest nuclear armed power in the history of the world. The idea that we would go flirting with multiple wars of choice at this point, it's not left wing or right wing. It's just reckless. There's no wisdom in it.
Michael Knowles.
All right, here we go. Dave Smith. I'm always confused whether Dave Smith is like pro-America or anti-America with some of the things he says. It's very hard to say sometimes. I don't know if he's like a agent for a foreign country, but in this, at the very least, what I can say in confidence is that he's been preaching the idea of being less interventionist of what other countries got going on, scaling back our involvement in other foreign conflicts and our kind of like imperialistic instincts. You know, he's a big critic of like the Iraq war, for example. So one thing I can at the very least respect is the consistency. Most MAGA don't have it. I'm sure Knowles is going to cape. We'll see if Knowles has some consistency. But most MAGA says, okay, you know, I'm okay. Even though I said no new wars, I'm okay with wars if Trump said so. He's at the very least standing 10 toes, which I respect. One of the biggest things I hate is MAGA hypocrisy, and I at the very least respect that. So we'll see.
I guess the argument against what Trump is doing is that many people who voted for Trump bought into the concept that what America first was take care of what's happening in your own backyard and stop meddling in foreign affairs. And now they're waking up almost on a daily basis to seeing Donald Trump proudly and aggressively talking about meddling in all sorts of foreign affairs. Is there a contradiction or hypocrisy or even a betrayal of voters going on here?
Not at all. First of all, Venezuela is in our own backyard, and it's been the policy of the United States in 1803.
So doing exactly what I expected. Bootlicker, MAGA dick sucker with his closeted gay self. Yeah, I'm just like, nothing surprised me. Of course he's going to defend it. This guy has no integrity
to manage the Western Hemisphere. So that, that's a cornerstone of American foreign policy. I think it is charming that Dave is defining America first in the way that he prefers. And I think there are plenty of people who wish to do that. But Dave, though a very popular podcaster, never won a presidential election. And Trump has been clear on what he means by America first, the political movement that he built, that people voted for in his coalition since the beginning. President Trump campaigned the first time around on destroying ISIS. So obviously that does not mean that America is only going to look inward. President Trump has carried out attacks, military operations that were extremely successful in Iran, in Syria, and Afghanistan, obviously in Venezuela. He's been talking about taking Greenland and even invading America's evil top hat, Canada, though I think he's mostly joking about that one since the beginning. So that's what that means.
Oh, he's mostly joking about that one, but I thought he was joking about the Greenland one. And also, he'd never mentioned invading Venezuela. That just wasn't one of the things he campaigned on. One of the things he campaigned on is ending wars, no new wars. That is a prime thing. Even with Greenland, that the expectation is a war won't happen, but he's trying to buy Greenland, right? That is completely different from invading and kidnapping a president and trying to regime change the entire country. So Michael Knowles is full of shit. He's a MAGA bootlicker, and I wonder how deep that dick goes down his throat. I'm curious. I have no idea. Probably pretty deep. I'm not gonna lie.
And what it comes down to is that America is a global empire. We just are. People can be upset about that. But unless your geopolitics comes strictly from Reddit, if your geopolitics actually comes from history, you recognize that we've been an empire since the Louisiana Purchase, okay? And we've been a muscular global empire since the Second World War.
Sure.
So President Trump's vision, I think, actually rejects two extremes.
As long as you send troops there, send money there, trying to take over the regime, not a war. So semantically, he didn't do it. He didn't do it. He's free from all blame. Base MAGA logic is one of the most convenient things ever. I'll be honest. I wish I lived in this kind of simplistic, ignorant world where all I have to do is listen to my master. Listen to my master. I'm sure a lot of people want me to listen to my master and get in my place, right?
It rejects conservative isolationism, and it rejects liberal internationalism, and it posits a conservative imperialism that says that we are going to recognize our role in the world, but we are going to pursue that role in limited ways with America's interest at heart. So there's been no regime change in Venezuela. We're talking about regime change in Venezuela. The regime is still in place. What we did was depose the leader. We left the vice president in place, and we said, act in a way that is appropriate in accordance with the law and our interests, or we're going to kill you. That's very different than
right. That's very different. That's super different, Michael Knowles. Very much so. You're cooking for sure. So different.
A Bushy-era neocon regime change in Iraq. Even when we're talking about Iran, the Trump administration has not gone in a particularly overt.
I could tell you never served base. I guess 4 years of boot camp meant nothing. Where's my keys? Hey, man. Base. One thing I learned being in the Marine Corps is that listening to Marines for how to understand politics is a joke.
Way yet, but even there, we would be talking about a restoration of the Pahlavi regime, most likely, that goes back to 1925. So I grant there are all sorts of risks to interventions, but we're the global empire, and frankly, even the American Revolution
global
comes out
empire.
Of global empire. It comes out of the 7 Years' War, which itself was a derivation of the War of Austrian Succession. To pretend that we don't have a role in geopolitics is to ignore all of American history.
Okay, Carl Kulinski, I can see you grimacing through a lot of what Michael was saying there. You said Trump says the US will run Venezuela and he threatens Colombia and Mexico. Arrest this psychotic motherfucker. Before I get you to expand on that thesis, I mean, the point I was making to Dave, if I want to elaborate on where I sit with this, so I've had a bit of time to look at this play out, is you look at Maduro.
Hey,
everyone thought, my God, this is going to be World War III.
My guy, Evan, take some of the crayons out of your mouth. Maybe it's hampering your vision. I just showed you a dog tag. So obviously there is impossible to say there's nothing there. You know what I'm saying?
Actually, Maduro's going to end up in a New York courtroom, and he's been got rid of. Everyone seems to agree that's a good thing for not just the Venezuelan people, but the world. No American troops died in what was an incredibly efficient surgical military strike.
Piers, keep on glazing. Keep on glazing, Piers. Glaze our military more. Do it!
To get him out of there. And if you have a more compliant leader of Venezuela, albeit part of the same regime, that can probably only be a good thing. If you look at the argument about Greenland, for example, I'd be struck by some of the people I didn't expect to think this was a good idea. A British general last week talking about this, saying that from a strategic security point of view, it would make perfect sense for America to have Greenland. And is there a deal to be done? He didn't think invading it was the right thing, and nor do I. But is there a deal to be done with 60,000 people who live in Greenland?
Is that self-owned by saying don't take advice from a military person when you're a military person? No, don't take advice from a military person if they eat crayons. Now, I'm gonna be honest, you kind of cooked me. I'm not gonna lie. You kind of cooked me, but I'm no longer in the military, so it works out. It works out.
That could actually improve the security of the United States and the West against the obvious threat from China and Russia and so on. And I can get to the others. Iran, getting rid of the Ayatollah and the mullahs is unquestionably a good thing for the world. It's how you
Base, Piers. Let's take over the world. America, imperialism. Lock in.
You do these Ayatollah, an obvious threat from China and Russia and so on. And I can get to the others. Iran, getting rid of the Ayatollah and the mullahs is unquestionably a good thing for the world. It's how you do these things and whether you plan and prepare properly for what follows next that I think are the debatable points. And history says that's normally, unfortunately, been very badly done. But this is what I meant when I said to Dave that I understand the argument. I may not agree with all of it, but I do understand the logic to what Trump is doing here. Do you?
Piers Morgan, you're such a bitch. Oh my God. I don't agree with it, but I understand some of his logic. Oh my God, you're such a pussy. Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, I don't know why he likes Trump so much. What does he have on you? Were you in the Epstein files too, Piers? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Are you protecting Trump so he doesn't release them Epstein files with your name in it? Is that what's going on, Piers? Because sometimes you be gawking this boy. Jesus.
No, because we don't have a right to act like this around the world. We're supposed to be a nation among nations, not a nation above nations. And they used to at least lie to us in the past and say that this is good for the world and we're spreading freedom and democracy. Now they don't even bother to lie. Now it's naked, rank, disgusting imperialism where they say, we're going to take the oil. And the point is that we're going to take the oil. We're going to take the minerals. We're going to take the precious metals. We're doing this for our corporations. We're doing it for the Epstein class, the billionaires. And this, to piggyback on what Dave Smith said, is frankly not what many of the MAGA voters thought they were signing up for. They thought America first actually meant America first. By the way, you also replaced the Maduro regime with the Maduro regime. Congratulations on that. It's also been now a week straight.
That's the funniest part. All that happened is we took Maduro and kept the vice president of Maduro. Bish. It's like removing Trump and keeping JD Vance. Right. So different. Okay.
Of pro-regime protests. Now you have roving gangs of Venezuelan militias that are kidnapping Americans. But again, I come back to the fundamental point, which is if you sign on to stuff like this, you're saying might makes right and the law of the jungle is back. What you're saying is China has a right to go into whatever smaller country they want and depose the leader and say we're doing it because we can and we have the right to do it and we have bigger guns and there's nothing you can do to stop it. So they're never going to address that fundamental question, which is why do we have a right? Do we actually believe in international law or was that all a joke? Are we rolling the clock back to the 1700s and the 1800s and we're going super primitive style here? And I think the answer to that is yes, they want to go super primitive style.
Today's show is sponsored by Oxford Natural.
I don't care about your sponsors, Piers. Let's continue.
International law goes back to antiquity. It's not some creation of modernity, whether we're talking about the 1700s or the 20th century.
The Geneva Conventions, the Nuremberg Tribunal, the Geneva Conventions and the Nuremberg Tribunal.
Yes, those exist, but international laws, the jus gentium goes back to antiquity. However, unfortunately, a lot of our liberal friends think history began a few decades ago.
The League of Nations was useless. It fell apart, and that's why we had the UN. That's why we had the Geneva Convention.
Right, I'm talking about millennia ago,
because we looked at piles of millions of dead bodies, and we said that's a bad idea. We looked at piles of millions of dead bodies and said that's a bad idea. Let's not do that anymore. Let's actually have a framework and rules and laws. And Trump is blowing that up. By the way, he bombed fishing boats from Venezuela, Trinidad, and Tobago, and Colombia. He just did the regime change in Venezuela. He bombed Yemen and Somalia and Nigeria and Iran. He's threatening Greenland and Panama and Canada and Cuba and Mexico. And you sit there the whole time and
this is like a psychopath smile. Every time he just be smiling randomly. This is not a normal person type of behavior. This dude is a psychopath.
act like it's okay. Is there anything Trump
It's
can do,
okay.
Michael Knowles,
It's
that
good.
you would say, I condemn it, and you hop off the Trump train, or are you going to tickle his taint for the rest of your fucking life?
No, there have been plenty of Trump policies that I've criticized because he's only right about 99.78% of the time. So the First Step Act I thought
Such
was a
a cuck.
misstep. But I would say the
Such a
rest.
cuck.
Excuse me. I would say the rest of the
Such a cuck.
the administration has been very successful. What's your problem? What's
My
your
problem is that
criticism?
you're a cuck and you're a hack and you're not an independent thinker and you're meat riding Trump.
Why do you
And
say
you know
that?
that what he's doing in
I just answered
imperialism
your
and you don't
question.
care.
I just
Yeah,
answered your question. and I
99.78%.
corrected
Congratulations.
the
You rented your
misstatements that
brain
you made.
to a war criminal, pedophile, rapist. I hope you're happy.
A war criminal, pedophile, rapist. Do you brought
Did I
up a
stutter?
point? You brought up international law, and you made a
Hey man, I'm here for the name calling. I'm here for it. That's all politics is nowadays because of Trump. I'm here for it, Kyle. Even though a lot of things I don't agree with what you say, we could team up right here. He is a cuck. He does love Trump. He does dick suck a lot. He probably will let Trump fuck his secret closeted gay boyfriend. So it's tough, man. It's tough, man.
very false point, a dumb point, which is that international law began only a few hundred years ago. I corrected you, and I pointed out that the international
No,
law
you
is
didn't.
part of the Western tradition. Excuse me one second. It goes back to antiquity. It's a principle of the jus gentium. And then you said, well, international law has failed because of the League of Nations failure, which I think is actually undermining your argument and proving my point and proving Trump's point, because the liberal internationalism that was established by people like Woodrow Wilson did in fact fail, which is why we need to restore an older.
Someone said, wait, what? Mike actually did a lot of like softcore gay porno in college. That shit. You low key. Wouldn't be surprised.
more classical conception of the international order, which is precisely what Trump's doing. So I think you've hoisted
Might
yourself
make
with
right.
your own petard.
Might
and then
make
you
right.
just make
Law
a
of the
lot
jungle
of
might make
vulgar
right.
sort of non sequiturs because you don't have a leg to stand on.
All right, let me bring in.
Let me ask you this question.
hang on,
Piers, let me ask him a question real quick. Tell me the name of the Minister of Defense in Venezuela.
I don't know. Whatever his name
Well,
is.
and that's a
Garcia
problem.
or
Is that you're
Rodriguez or
advocating for a
something.
regime change. You don't know the first thing.
I did.
They're not really that fast talking. I just have it at 1.25 speed. That's all. 1.25. That's it.
I
About the
just said the
country,
opposite.
you're
I argued
advocating for the
against the
regime
regime change.
He
Kyle,
actually
you have
said
to
the
get the cotton out
opposite.
of your ears.
I heard Michael
Kyle, I just want to correct
I heard
something.
Michael
You said I'm
Knowles
arguing for
say
regime
the
change.
regime.
How did you hear Michael Knowles say anything when his dick is so deep in your throat? I just don't. Man, let me chill. I gave Piers props with the Nick Fuentes interview, and I gave him props with the Candace Owens one. It's just the only time he actually gets a spine is when he's dealing with like people who start talking bad about his daddy Trump. Like Nick Fuentes has been talking bad about Trump. Candace has been talking bad about Trump. So that's what's like, oh, I can finally have some integrity and go after these people. This guy, man. This guy.
Regime remains there, right? So he said the opposite. In fact, I want to bring in Coleman.
No, but he wanted to take out Maduro. Don't give me that cutesy little
Yes,
BS.
but he
It's
made
not
the
a regime
point that the
change.
regime
It's
is
a
still.
regime.
He made the point the regime is still there, and the vice president appears to be much more compliant with running Venezuela the way America would prefer for its national security than Maduro. So that's what Michael said. He did Venezuela the way America will there, and the vice president appears to be much more compliant with running Venezuela the way America would prefer for its national security than Maduro. So
Where's the good point that was made? We have a Maduro guy there, and they fell in line because we threatened them. What's the good point? I'm very confused. Why are you people more mad than the Venezuela people? Maduro. I don't like Maduro. I'm not an unhinged leftist by any means. My thing is that Donald Trump is just doing whatever the fuck he wants without congressional approval. The one, and I'm really just calling out the MAGA hypocrisy, where there was people who were saying no new wars, and then they're fine with international intervention and spending all this money and ruining the debt. All like they don't care about that stuff all of a sudden, even though they use this as a means to get Trump elected. That's literally what Dave Smith said, which I 100% agree with. That is objectively true. That is one of their positions. They completely changed because Daddy Trump said so. So that's it. That's what's going on. So didn't go through the legal process, and MAGA a bunch of hypocrites, basically.
that's what Michael said. He didn't advocate regime change. Let me bring in Coleman
That is-
Hughes.
I don't care
Coleman,
about Maduro.
Considering the president
Well,
hang on, Carl. Let me bring in
regime change.
Coleman hasn't said a word yet. Coleman, what's interesting about you, I think, with this is you've been, I think, striving to
Did Obama get approval for bin Laden? Yes. Yes, he did. He got congressional approval. Indeed, yes.
quite
Correct.
nuanced with your take on all this stuff that's going on. And that's kind of where I found myself, is that sometimes taking a beat, looking at it from just a step away, and trying not to be too knee-jerk about all these things, often can be beneficial to your mental health, but actually can probably better, I think, represent what is really going on here. Everyone wants to go to extremes very, very quickly about everything and take a very tribal position.
Your bitch ass saying that pisses me off. What? Aren't you the ones who complain about the wokies all the fucking time and are super tribal about the wokies and Biden? Oh, and you talked about the negativity of Biden and Kamala Harris. You literally fall into the camp of doing that all the fucking time. You never use nuance when referring to the Dems or the left at all. When it comes to trans people, you're never nuanced. You're literally the extreme where you think trans people are like the worst kind of entities and ruining women's sport. You are the definition of falling in line with that. Stop pretending that you're this nuanced thinker. Get the fuck out of here.
I've been struck by your, I think, quite intellectually honest attempt to be more nuanced. So what do you think about all this?
Thank you, Piers. I try to not think about these issues in terms of left versus right or Trump versus the opposition and try to take each issue.
So he works for the free press. So is he like the free press? Okay, let's hear him out. Let's hear him out if he actually uses his brain. Okay, let's hear it.
On its own terms. So let's do that. Venezuela. If the policy here is actual regime change, in other words, not just decapitating Maduro and replacing Maduro with a second worst alternative, if we were to actually affect regime change in Venezuela, that would almost certainly be a good thing for the people of Venezuela and for American interests. Now, if we're going to do this half measure where we just decapitate Maduro and replace him with someone just as bad and then get a bunch of oil, well, that would at best be probably neutral for the Venezuelan people. It would be an enormous waste of U.S. military resources, and I would be very critical of the Trump administration. The truth is, I don't know which path we're going down, right? It's very early.
Right.
We're getting different signals from Trump depending on the day, different signals from Rubio, and anyone who's confidently prognosticating that they know which path we're going down probably doesn't know what they're talking about. As for
So them putting in the vice president and saying that we just want oil is us not knowing what we're talking about. So literally the second option, which is the exact option that is happening now, is us not knowing what we're talking about. I don't know. My eyes see what I see. My ears hear what I hear. But this is the problem with these type of people. This kind of fake centrism. They kind of muddy the water. They make it seem like there's both sides or both viewpoints are equally as valuable. In reality, there's much more evidence that what's happening is the second thing he said. There's literally no evidence that they are putting in a person that is better for the people of Venezuela right now. There's no evidence of that. So interesting viewpoints, I guess. No evidence. All right.
Greenland. I think the truth is Trump is extraordinarily reckless in his rhetoric here. We have a situation where we have an ally in Denmark, a NATO ally. We have deep relationships with Greenland already. We have a military base. We have mineral connections. And so the idea of taking Greenland by force against the will of the people who live there is absolutely ridiculous. Now, that said, if we were to purchase it, I think that'd be a good thing. It'd have to happen with their.
If we were to purchase it, that would be a good thing. Purchasing it is different, but this also goes into the idea, why the fuck are we purchasing a country? Like, with what money? The taxpayer dollars, right? A lot of people already have issues with us wasting money, but now we're buying an entire country. Interesting.
Consent. They would have to want it,
right? And
I would welcome them as an American, but we absolutely cannot take it by force.
Right. See, that to me, Dave Smith, is part of the interesting part of all this, is that it's how this plays out.
Someone said one viewpoint is don't threaten American allies, and the other is saying the exact opposite. How can they even both sides of this? I don't know how you could both sides of this, but he tried. He tried his best. He tried his best. He tried his best. If we purchase it, with what money? Like, what money are we purchasing it with? Come on. At least we wouldn't waste taxes Somali fraud. Hey, he cooked so fucking hard. Ugh.
What actually Trump really wants
Get
to do.
it.
If he doesn't economic, I mean, take, for example, what China's been doing in Africa for the last 20 years. It's been going around Africa pretty quietly, actually, unless you're actually in Africa. And it's been doing endless commercial deals with African countries where they go in, they spend a lot of money on infrastructure and hospitals and bridges and roads and all these things. And in return, they get access to huge amounts of minerals. And that's been going on for 20 years. And that's a kind of economic imperialism. I see no ideological difference between that and what Trump is potentially talking about with Greenland, which is clearly.
Why are you comparing? Why are we doing anything like China and Africa? Why is that? Why are we even doing that comparison? Why are we even doing that comparison? What makes you think that is something we should be doing? We should be doing what China's doing in Africa. What makes you think that is something we should be doing with Greenland? Why is that? Piers, I hate you. I just hate you. I hate you so much.
Incredibly important strategically, from a security point of view, from a mineral point of view, and so on. And there are only 60,000 people who live there, and it may well be that they're happy to do a deal if the price is right. In which case,
I truly believe Trump killed Kirk Capetto.
Yeah. Well, I'll say I pretty much agree with Coleman. I guess on that, like if it's voluntary, then okay. I don't really know enough about Greenland to really speak on it intelligently, but I could not disagree more with the take on Venezuela. And I think it's crazy, Piers. I also think, it just after the last 25 years, and I'm not saying they're exactly the same, but the idea that we're just talking about regime changes in Iran and Venezuela and saying it would undoubtedly be a good thing if this regime were to fall. Well, maybe, but there's a really important question of what comes next. And if you want to say that, like, we've had a long history of regime changes in Latin America that have been disastrous too. We overthrew a communist government in the 50s in Guatemala, led to a civil war where hundreds of thousands of people died. So the idea that it's a guarantee that it would be a good thing if either one of these regimes fell, we certainly don't know that. And one of the other things we know is that you really don't get much of a say in what replaces the regime that falls unless you're willing to militarily occupy the country. And we've had regime change. We might be able to affect a full regime change without a military occupation, as we did in Libya, as we did in Syria. But those are not great examples where the country worked out. I mean, Syria is hanging on by a hair, and Libya is an absolute catastrophe. And there's no.
Another potent example is the stuff with Afghanistan, right? Trying to go in there, help the country, get rid of like all the people in power. And then we were working with the government to kind of get rid of a lot of the terrorist groups, occupied it, being there for years. We had like over a 20-year war. Nothing was happening. Nothing was changing. A lot of people were dying. And then eventually we started moving out. And then the Taliban eventually started taking over. So when we involve ourselves in these countries, if we just don't, it's either you go in full cost, really ready to completely reform that country from the bottom up. These half-assed measures end up just worsening the issue and just prolonging it, and obviously costing American lives and American money. I am sympathetic to the cause that there are certain countries that probably should be demolished because they are like humanitarian crises over there. I'm very sympathetic to that, of course. I don't believe that Donald Trump gives a two shits about what happens to Venezuelan people. We saw what he did with the Venezuelans. He removed all their statuses and just sent them to like different types of like immigrant prisons. He doesn't give two fucks about Venezuelans. He doesn't care. All he cares about the oil. But in general, in the conversation about like Americans and their involvement in these other countries and the idea of regime change, I don't know. There's not enough examples that we've been able to do it like correctly. There's just honestly not a lot, arguably none. So I don't know. It's a tough conversation to have for sure.
So it's just like it's very reckless when you start playing.
Trump blew Bubba. He indeed blew Bubba. Putin knows he blew Bubba. He knows he blew Bubba.
You start dropping bombs on human beings, you start toppling governments, you start kidnapping or taking, leaders of countries. There's unintended consequences that come with all of these things. That's probably the one lesson.
Trump got his back blown up by Clinton.
Nobody is smart enough to predict exactly what's going to come next. And so I just think it's, I see this with the situation.
Look at the panel. We need a flood back. Yo, hey man, if a flood does happen, if the glaciers do melt, we know why. We know why. It's bound to happen. The world's gonna reset itself, I'm sure.
In Iran, I say Michael Knowles are there. It's like, guys, it's like you hoist up the mission accomplished banner 2 days after the strike. We have absolutely no idea what's going to come of this. Obviously, in the situation in Iran, just right in front of all of our eyes, Piers. What the goalpost?
I get what you're saying, but there wouldn't be a Western Europe. Okay, fair. Like there are certain like European like conflicts, obviously, like the World War I and World War II, where U.S. involvement was necessary to kind of save from absolute disaster. 100%. I guess I'm thinking more like beyond these like huge wars, beyond that, like more individualistic conflicts. I guess that's probably my focus. But you're right, especially for like World War II, our involvement was 100% necessary.
Have moved from 60% enriched uranium, which is what me and Coleman were arguing about a few months ago. That's out the window now, right? Nobody even cares about or is pretending there's a nuclear threat. Donald Trump's bragging about how it's obliterated. Then both Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump moved the goalpost to intercontinental ballistic missiles. And then that was the war propaganda for a couple months there. Now it's over whether they shoot protesters or rioters. Not even like an accusation that they're committing a genocide or are a threat to another country. They invaded their neighbor, nothing like that. So I would just say, I think one of the most important lessons, and Michael, who's a history buff, would know that every last one of the founders of this country talked about this all the time, is that you want to be sober and calm and rational. You want to not intervene when you don't need to. There's all types of unintended consequences that can come from these things. And that's why the advice of the founders was be friends with the world. Don't get into entangling alliances. Don't search for monsters to destroy, to fight unnecessary wars. These are all wars of choice.
Every new year, I think about what a real fresh start looks like.
Until it was almost eliminated, had to tuck their tail between their legs and run to Pakistan because of the U.S. Yeah, but now with like in Afghanistan in particular, the Taliban have control again. So like even though we killed bin Laden, even though we killed a lot of other people like related to ISIS, the question is them regaining control, was it worth it? I think you probably could say it's worth it, but it's like I don't know. It's hard. It's a tough conversation, I would say. It's to figure out what the best thing for America to do with some of these conflicts. I'm sympathetic to the American people. The American people need their money here in America, and I don't care about Venezuela, and I don't care about Israel and our problem. If you're super focused on what America got going on, I understand that. I'm not like all the way there. I think we can do both, but at least keep that principle. If you're just America first, focus on what we going on, changing just because Donald Trump told you so is one of the most weakest, spineless type of things to do. It's just fucking... It's hypocritical. You basically just do what Donald Trump says because he's your daddy, and it's ridiculous.
International war? Was it the Iraq War? Was it the Gulf War?
You're talking about the Barbary Pirates or what?
The way the states pulled out of there was the problem. I mean, so the initial, there definitely was there a problem. So the initial deal that was made was Donald Trump made the deal with the Taliban to remove ourselves from there. So he made a deal without the Afghanistan government, and they just had to comply because, you know, they didn't want to piss off Donald Trump, and they wouldn't want them to kind of just leave. So when Biden took control, he basically just continued the Donald Trump agreement, and again did not include the Afghanistan government. So both Trump and Biden need criticism from this 100%. And then that just allowed Taliban to kind of start taking control, especially in the period where the Doha Agreement happened. The Taliban were attacking people. They started spreading propaganda that now we have control of these areas. And then Biden came in and he just took everybody out, didn't let the Afghanistan government know, and the Taliban took advantage of that situation. So both Trump and Biden kind of screwed over the Afghanistan government. That really helped the Taliban gain control in the area, and it's just very unfortunate. I'm so glad there's someone reasonable on this matter we're talking about. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that really just don't know what happened, and the idea that you can just say it's like, but Donald Trump, just Donald Trump, or just Joe Biden is just objectively not true. Joe Biden had a part to play into it, and so did Donald Trump. That's just facts. Like, there's really not much else to say beyond that.
You're right.
I'm talking about 1801. And I was actually, what was our first big international war? Was it the Iraq War? Was it the Gulf War?
You're talking about the Barbary Pirates or whatever. I don't know.
You're right. I'm talking about 1801. And I was actually our founding fathers who waged that war.
Okay, but Dave,
So it goes back to
Thomas Jefferson waged the war. Whatever. We don't have real time to get into that, but sure, we got 5 wars here.
We have plenty of time, but you don't want to get into it because it undercuts your
No,
argument.
I'm happy. Michael, if you want to come on my podcast, I'll do 2 hours on the Barbary Wars with you. The point is that we're trying to talk about the 5 conflicts going on right now. Sure.
Dave, let me address the Venezuela point.
Sure. Let me see. Coleman might have something smart to say.
Yeah. So you're totally right.
So we would be in better spot with Democrat president. Objectively, yes, we'd be in a better spot with a Democrat president, 100%. Understand not trusting Trump, but to still trust Dems is insane to me. Because you live in a MAGA bubble. I can't help you if you live in that MAGA bubble. I can't do anything for you. Crazy enough, I had a podcast episode earlier today where I really tried. I talked to a MAGA supporter, and I tried my hardest for him to kind of see like he's kind of brainwashed, and he just wasn't having it. He just wasn't having it at all.
Always a risk to regime change, and I don't mean to downplay that, but you have to factor in there is a risk to letting rogue.
Oh, someone said something earlier. The bombing was by ISIS-K after he killed the general who was defeating them in Syria, allowing them to resurge or return to Afghanistan. Who you referred to? The bombing was by ISIS-K after he killed the general who was defeating them in Syria. Not exactly sure what you're referring to there. No, I voted against Trump twice. I actually voted for Biden. Really? If you're critical of Biden because of obviously him being old and decrepit, valid. I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm just surprised that you created this broad brush on Dems in general. You'll vote Democrat no matter what, but I'm brainwashed. I mean, that's just not true. I don't give 2 shits of whether or not you're a Democrat or Republican. I said I would have voted for Nikki Haley over Kamala Harris. So I don't know how you came to that conclusion. I thought Nikki Haley was a good candidate in the Republican primary. I thought she was good. I thought Doug Burgum was good, but he's kind of a bot now. Nikki Haley's kind of like her morals are kind of getting too. Once you start becoming a Trump shill, you start Chris Christie looks like he might still have a backbone, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
Regimes that, for instance, in the case of Venezuela, invite Hezbollah into the country, buy weapons from all of our adversaries, Iran, China, Russia, etc. A regime that has literally run this country, which used to be one of the wealthier countries in Latin America.
History's already, you're 100%.
That people are literally eating wildlife. They're
Joe
breaking
Biden's
into zoos,
like
eating cats and dogs because this regime has totally destroyed the country. There is a risk to allowing a country like that to just continue doing whatever it's going to do.
More,
and so the idea that inaction has no risk is one thing I want to flag as a.
And Nikki Haley 100% caved. I was so disappointed when Nikki Haley caved. I was like, really? Come on, bro. You really caved? You really sacrificed your morals, Nikki? Apparently, Nikki Haley's son is like a groiper, which is kind of crazy. Apparently, I was like, damn, what is you touching your kids?
Something smart to say.
Yeah, so you're totally right. There is always a risk to regime change, and I don't mean to downplay that, but you have to factor in there is a risk to letting rogue regimes that, for instance, in the case of Venezuela, invite Hezbollah into the country, buy weapons from all of our adversaries, Iran, China, Russia, etc. A regime that has literally run this country, which used to be one of the wealthier countries in Latin America, into the ground to the point that people are literally eating wildlife. They're breaking into zoos, eating cats and dogs because this regime has totally destroyed the country. There is a risk to allowing a country like that to just continue doing whatever it's going to do. And so the idea that inaction has no risk is one thing I want to flag as a false argument. And the second thing I want to say is you're quick to reach for analogies to the Middle East. And I understand that. I mean, the American public has lost so much faith in the American political class because of our interventions in the Middle East. And the lesson I think you've drawn and other people have drawn is that therefore regime change is always wrong. I don't think that that's the right lesson. I mean, to me, that's analogous to taking the lesson from World War II that regime change is always right because it worked in Japan and Germany. The truth is it's different depending on the situation on the ground. In most of the Middle, you're talking about Iraq.
You're cooking as well.
You're talking about deeply sectarian countries with deep divisions, countries that are essentially civil wars waiting to happen if the lid comes off. Venezuela is not a country like that. Again, the risk is not zero, but it's not a sectarian country. It was a functioning country for a very long time, and so the risk of civil war type outcomes like Syria and Iraq is just much lower than it is in the Middle East.
So what about?
Can I respond to that?
Hang on.
Yes, please.
I want to just censor it actually just on this point. Let's bring it right up to date with Iran, Coleman, if I may, because depending on who you listen to, there's a revolution going on driven by the people to depose an incredibly unpopular regime that's been there since 1979. Are we seeing the potential for civil war there? Are we seeing a revolution that should happen organically without any interference or aid? Is Trump right to say we're going to stand up for protesters who want freedom and democracy against a tyrannical regime and so on? In other words, all the things that we've been discussing about other scenarios, let's bring it to Iran. What's your view of what's happening there?
Well, Iran is, I think it's, you're asking me, Piers?
Yeah.
I think we should support the opposition. Absolutely. You know, I don't think we should put boots on the ground. I think I agree with Dave. Our record in the Middle East recently, I think, precludes that for many reasons, just practical reasons. But we absolutely should support the opposition. Iran was a country that was a semi-functional democracy for a very long time. In a lot of ways, it's a more coherent country, a more coherent body politic than Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, et cetera. So again, I think the odds of success for a revolution there are higher, but that's not saying much considering that the region is extremely volatile to begin with. So I totally support the opposition. I want to see the Islamic regime go down on their terms. And we should do what we can to support that short of full-scale military intervention.
Okay, Michael Knowles, what do you feel about Iran?
Come on, Pierce, let me respond to that.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, I'll come to you, Michael.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, you respond, then we'll come to Michael.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's just so much there. And like, look, I mean, even if you're going to say that, like, well, we have a bad track record of.
Someone said democracy is fake and gay. You got it. You win. You got it.
Regime change in the Middle East. I mean, I think I made this point. I think I saw your point coming. That's why I said, yeah, we also have a terrible track record of regime change in Central and South America. And that's why I gave the example of Guatemala. We can look at Nicaragua. We can look at all types of different interventions that just got a whole lot of people killed and didn't do anything for the people or for the country. And Coleman, yeah, fair enough. There's a risk to inaction the same way there's a risk to action. But the risk to action is to our boys and our budget and bankrupting our country. And so it's just a totally different risk that you take on when you intervene than when you don't. And, you know, I got to say, Coleman, these are the same arguments that were used in Iraq. What you said about Nick.
All right, Corey, I'll give you a little attention. It's just you're saying like MAGA propaganda, and like it's just so clearly not false. I mean, not true. It's like I'm not interested. But Corey, because you keep on asking, I will entertain you a little bit. All right, my boy. Biden tried to replace voters with foreigners to steal all future elections, the biggest treason in U.S. history, and all Democrats are guilty. That's just not true. That's all I got to say. Nothing about that is true. Let's move on. Illegal immigrants don't vote.
I'm sorry, what you said about Venezuela and Iran. This is why the neocons said we were going to be greeted as liberators. Chalabi had assured them that the people hated Saddam and they were going to be pro-American. And you said there's not sectarian conflict in Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela.
Kyle's the only one worth listening to. Typically, I would agree, but Dave Smith is actually being kind of based, which, you know, shout out.
People hated Saddam and they were going to be pro-American. And you said there's not sectarian conflict in Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela, no, of course there is. It's the mixed European elite class and then the majority of natives. And that's who Chavez and Maduro always carried. At least I know in Chavez's election, that was always his base. And I agree with you, man. Like, it is true that that government has ruined that country. I am not, I hate socialism as much, if not more than anybody on this.
Sorry, K-Swap. It's just, I need to speed it up. Sometimes they be yapping. I need them to speak a little faster.
Panel. But the thing is, like, it was a communist government in Guatemala too, and the civil war that killed hundreds of thousands of people there didn't make it better for them. And so I just think that, like, the idea that we're so confident we should back the resistance in Iran. Well, we also had regime changes in that region that didn't require like huge numbers of boots on the ground, and they were catastrophes too. And to hear you guys talk about the most likely thing is that, you know.
Corey, I'm really looking for streamers objective and centered and truthful. No, you want someone to be MAGA like you. Stop lying. I literally gave one of the most centered and objective takes regarding Afghanistan, where I blame Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I don't know. You're not going to find that on MAGA side. Trust me, Corey. Every MAGA person you find is going to say it's all Joe Biden. I said it was both of them. So respect me, okay? Respect the purple political breakdown. All right, you ain't gonna find people who have this type of knowledge.
Because now you understand we have to spread hereditary monarchy. We're not bringing democracy anymore. The idea that the Shaw's kid is going to walk in there and take power. I say, of all the crazy things Donald Trump has said, that was one thing that I think he got right. Yeah, I don't think he's got the juice. And the options.
Democrats have their issue, but saying they're worse than Trump.
There's at least a strong possibility that there'd be tons of conflict and a worse government, if not just as bad a government at the end of the day.
Okay, Michael Knowles, the latest Polymarket odds on Iran. US strikes 77% likelihood. Khomeini, the Ayatollah, out by the end of January. I think it's now up
to them, objective means putting Trump and Biden at the same level. They really want me to. It's just not true. Trump and Biden are not at the same level. It's just like objectively not true. It's just absolutely not. What's common? No. What's common? Yeah, I don't know. Mega sour group. We shouldn't take other people's country. This is why UN was created by the world as a whole. Yeah, I'm not really for taking other countries. That's why I'm kind of against what Russia's doing to Ukraine. We live in a society, right? Shout out the Joker, a society, W, right? Come on.
24%. Fall of the Iranian regime by 2028, 47%. So the money's moving.
Why the fuck are you bringing up poly market as a means of a political debate? What are we doing? This is not serious politics. Politics is not serious. What do you mean we're bringing up poly market for a political debate? Who the fuck cares what poly market has to say? Trolling.
In the predictive world, to suggesting that this is the beginning, as the Chancellor of Germany says, this is the
Anyone
beginning
involved
of the
with
end of that regime. But we
all
have
of
been on
them.
this
I
radio a
agree.
few times
All
in
of them.
Iran,
And Clinton and
and
Trump
it's been
supporters.
brutally repressed in the past. What do you think is going to
USA
happen
must
here? And in terms
invade
of that point,
Canada. Yo, what is wrong with this guy? You say USA must invade Canada. Fuck those pussies. Oh man, W troll man. He said democracy is gay and we should invade Canada. He got it. He got it. W troll shit. Wherever you're from, maybe you're from Nigeria, maybe you're from China, maybe you're from Russia. Your trolling is funny. It's not effective, but it's funny. It's why he keeps you know what? Let's look at that again. Dancer 009. You got the frog thing.
Dave Mace, when things happen organically, you know, the fall of the Berlin
Peak
Wall,
rage
I remember
bait.
watching that and how
For
good that
sure.
felt. And it didn't need outside direct military intervention. Is it not better for America to sit back and watch the Iranian people determine their own future?
Steve Bannon went to prison for the same thing Bill did this week. Lock up Steve Bannon and lock up Bill Clinton. I don't give a fuck. I know you want me really bad to just defend Democrats no matter what. No, I actually have integrity. Lock up that weirdo Bill Clinton.
Future in the way that appears to be happening, then potentially cause mayhem by directly interfering on their behalf.
Well, I think those are two separate points. And I think my friends on this panel are taken with a lot of abstract ideology, whether it's libertarianism or leftism. I'm a little more interested in practical politics. So what I think is most important here is that Iran remains orderly and does not descend into total chaos. Iran is a real country with a more of a unified history. And also that the Iranian people do better. Obviously, the Islamic Revolution was terrible for them. It destroyed their material conditions, led to a huge erosion of their rights and liberties. And so it's worth remembering that the policy of the United States has been for regime change in Iran since 1979. So the Iranians have been undermining our interests all around the world for a very long time. Not just looking at the recent Iraq war, where they killed over 600 Americans, but going all the way back to the 1983 Beirut barracks bombings, going back to the attack on U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia in 1996. I think we would all agree, I hope we're all mature enough to agree, that nations have interests, especially when you are a major power or a hegemonic power as the United States. We have interests around the world. Dave keeps pointing to his displeasure over one intervention in Guatemala. The United States has intervened for 150 years, 88 times in Latin America. It's usually worked out very well. Sometimes it hasn't worked out well. But what would have been worse is if we had let, during the Cold War, the Soviets get a hold in Latin America. What is worse is allowing communists to run roughshod, both from the perspective of the people there, as well as from the interests of the United States.
New Year is all about starting afresh, and today's sponsor will help you to do exactly.
This is my thing. I'm not fully against. I already set my positions. My biggest criticism is that there's just the hypocrisy. Do you guys want to intervene with other countries or don't you? What is it? What is the message? You can't be running for this one platform and then just change your mind. You can't complain about tax dollars getting sent to Ukraine or tax dollars getting sent to Israel, but then go like, all right, tax dollars are fine to buy Greenland and tax dollars are fine to invade and occupy Venezuela. Like, be consistent. I don't trust Knowles is consistent. I guarantee that this little cuck right here was on Twitter talking about all these reasons why we shouldn't be involved in this, why we shouldn't be involved with that. Yeah, facts, no new wars. He probably said hashtag no new wars on Twitter. This guy has no fucking integrity. He'll do whatever it does to help his boy Trump, man. Oh yeah, and then you're right, Patty. The U.S. did bail out Argentina with all that corrupt ass a fucking election. Um, yeah, it's just weird. Keep your soldiers in your country. Probably a good idea, right? Probably a good idea. Depending on depending on the situation, it's contextual. There are situations where American intervention is warranted. There's situations where American intervention is not warranted. Depends on the context.
Act with impunity. Take Greenland if it
The
wants.
world is sick of
et cetera, et
Americans
cetera.
bullying other
What is to
nations.
stop
Hmm.
America's enemies using the exact same argument to do what the hell they like? For example,
Well,
Vladimir Putin must be sitting there going,
Stay out of
"Hang
all
on,
of it.
every
You can
argument
say,
about
yeah,
why
I
invading
don't
Ukraine
agree with like
has just gone up in smoke, isn't it? I mean,
anti-interventionism.
it's the same argument. I wanted to do it. It's in my national security interest. You've got the President Xi probably looking at it going, well, why can't I take Taiwan then? If the Americans can take Greenland because it's in their national security interest, then I want Taiwan. And how difficult does it then become for the West and America leading the West to take any high moral ground or to stop it happening in any way if they've already trampled on international law themselves?
I think that first of all, I disagree with the premise, but second of all, I think my ideological friends on this panel seem to be quite mistaken about a basic premise here, which is they seem to believe that the United Nations or something is what keeps our enemies from running roughshod over the world, American interests and other people's. That's not true. You know what stops our enemies? We do. The might of the United States is what stops.
That's not a good argument. You're basically reinforcing the idea that we can do whatever they want because we're the most powerful. And we do have a lot of power. We are very strong militarily. We're increasing our military might. All of that is true. But there is a end all be all force of nature that exists right now that can change the equation against any country. We just never wanted to go there, right? We never wanted, certain things being sent in the sky and dropping and killing millions of people. We don't want that to happen, right? So this idea is we can use might to do whatever they want. So because we're America, we can take Greenland. Because we're America, we can tell China they can't take Taiwan. Is a terrible fucking premise. It's a terrible premise. Yes, you can say the United States is an enforcement force that helps back the UN legitimacy. But also what helps backs the UN legitimacy is kind of the agreement, the compromise between all nations with this overextending principle that we'll all be behind the idea that what this country is doing is not okay. All that pressure from all the entities, including the number one force in the world, is the most important factor here, which is why being part of certain deals like being part of NATO is so pivotal, which is why Russia does not want Ukraine to be a part of NATO, which is why Taiwan being a part of it is huge. It gives them that extra level of security, legitimacy, protection. So it's not just only because they're part of the United States or they're backed by the United States. It's also because we have these relationships. We agreed upon this type of standard that all these civilized countries should be holding. We all can put pressure economically and militarily. There is more than one country in the world. If every country, now, it's hypothetical. I'm pro-America, so I'll always be pro-America as long as we don't turn into Nazi Germany. If America went up against like every nation in the world, it wouldn't be good for us, no matter how strong our military is, right? So, yeah, this premise by Michael Knowles that, it's the only thing keeping people in check is just the United States is fucking ridiculous. That's a ridiculous premise. Let's see. That might be a solid clip. That might be a solid clip. I still think that his judgment over Democrats, but I don't trust his judgment over Democrats. Corey, maybe one day we can get you out of that kind of mindset. And maybe one day we can have a conversation, understand why you dislike Democrats so much. There's things to be dissatisfied, for sure. I just don't understand why, like, trusting MAGA over Democrats is the answer. I just don't get it.
Now, the reason I disagree with your fundamental premise is I don't think that we violated international law in the removal of Maduro. First of all, the Monroe Doctrine, now the Donroe Doctrine, has been the cornerstone of American foreign policy basically since the beginning. But two, there was a legal predicate for the removal of Maduro that goes back to a court order in 2020. And this has really gone back about 25 years now. Let us not forget it was the Biden-Harris administration and Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, who called for the arrest of Maduro and actually offered $25 million to anyone who could advance it.
Obama also did not get congressional approval to put troops in Syria, Yemen, Libya, or Somalia. I don't know if I fully believe you or agree with the context. I'd have to look into it to know for sure.
So the only difference between the Republican action here and what the Democrats called for just 1 year ago
Current
is that Trump was actually able to do it, and he saved $25 million doing it.
Why
So
should
it's more
but by that
efficient.
logic,
the argument.
But
That's
by that,
the
hang on,
argument
but
that Trump,
by
Trump
that
got
logic,
Biden's policy done.
well, by that logic, Michael, why should President Xi not be able to go into Taiwan and take the leader and put him in a Chinese courtroom? By that logic.
Can I address that, Piers?
He's got no answer, Piers.
I'm happy to answer.
Well, let
Michael answer, and I'll come to you.
Interrupting before. Yes. So the only reason that Xi has not gone into Taiwan so far is because the United States has told Xi not to. From the point of international law, there is also another confusion because international law is a real thing. Many of my fellow conservatives want to pretend that there is no such thing as international law and that might merely makes right, but that's not true. Law is an ordinance of reason, so we can actually know something about it, and it objectively exists even though it's not material. However, what passes for international law these days, specifically over the last 100 or so years, is a bunch of liberal gobbledygook nonsense, which even my friend here, Kyle Kulinski, points out doesn't work, which is why the League of Nations failed and the UN has largely failed. So there is such a thing as natural law, but it is effected through political powers. And right now, the only thing stopping Xi from going into Taiwan, the only thing that has stopped Vladimir Putin from running roughshod over Ukraine is not some abstract concept in the clouds. It's the might of the United States empire and our allies around the world. And that is what will continue to stop them.
You changed it from the might of the United States to the might of the United States and our allies. You completely changed your notion. And our might with our allies gets heavily skewed if we invade Greenland. All our allies are already saying, don't do that. Even Putin said that us invading Greenland would be bad for the entire world. Putin said that. This man wants to fucking invade Ukraine so bad. There is a reason why so many of our allies are sending troops to Greenland right now. So if your premise is the only thing stopping China from invading Taiwan is our might and our allies, then if we lose the allies, then that might gets heavily diminished. So yeah, I think he doesn't really understand that, or maybe he's being like dumb on purpose. I don't get that.
Carl, I will bring you in now, but I don't think that
Putin does not want Ukraine.
He just invaded
hasn't taken the country yet.
Well, he invaded it, took as much as he could, but the Ukrainians have put up a much bigger fight than he thought they could. But I don't think Putin's intention.
Yeah, they're definitely not our allies anymore.
Well, he only invaded because of Biden. So frankly, had Trump stayed, I don't think he would have even invaded. But it's true. He was able to run some roughshod over it during Joe Biden. But there was no floating international law. Let's not forget, he invaded before the supposedly awful attack on Venezuela.
But he has. I mean, look. But the thing is, Michael, Putin has continued to act with total impunity in Ukraine, regardless of anything Donald Trump has said publicly, either in a friendly or unfriendly manner. He doesn't seem to care. I think if Putin could take the whole of Ukraine tomorrow, he'd take it. I think that's always been his ambition.
That's my point, I guess. That's my point. I don't think that America's very successful strike on Venezuela is going to.
Michael Knowles, your point is shit. Your point is all over the place. You're just yapping. This thing is running. Nothing of substance is coming out. What are you talking about?
Do one thing. Now, it will not change one iota of Putin's calculation.
No, but that's my point. My point to you is that when it comes to Taiwan,
devious,
I'm not sure that American power.
This false dichotomy of we want Greenland to protect ourselves from Russia, even though we've been like one of the most what's the word? Open-minded, compassionate, willing participants and letting Russia do what they want is so counterintuitive. It's ridiculous. Donald Trump doesn't give two fucks what Russia is doing. If he could, he would force Ukraine to give up so much territory to Putin to please him. So come on. I was once on your side. I hope I can get to you to open your current Democrats are treason, have frauded the American people tenfold to Republicans. We should all be judged by our worth, not skin. All right, base. Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know. You're kind of just yapping to me.
Is the limiting factor for the calculations by people who run countries like Russia and China.
And I'm also
that you
not a
seem to think it
Democrat,
is.
so
Because
I
I
don't
think
care
Xi would have looked at Ukraine and thought, well, what's America actually done to stop Putin
Piers,
taking as much
do you
as he
think that
can?
international law is going to limit Chairman Xi?
Well, no, I don't
got a
actually.
bridge in Brooklyn
I do
to
think
say.
the concept of international law has been twisted and torn apart so badly that I'm actually
Greenland's
uncertain
not
what it
okay
really
with
means
it,
anymore. Because people don't seem to. I mean, if you look at what Israel's done in Gaza, I would say they've trampled over international law with utter impunity, and they don't care. And
Reasonable minds can differ, but I agree that's a good point on the
No, they can't.
murkiness of international law.
Yeah, okay, Carl.
Yeah, well, I mean, I find this whole conversation preposterous because the idea that we're the moral arbiter of anything is honestly laughable. Trump is himself a criminal. He was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He's covering for a billionaire pedophile cabal as we speak. We armed and funded a genocide in Gaza. We also armed and funded a genocide committed by Saudi Arabia in Yemen. If there's any country on earth where there's some semblance of a sound argument to do regime change, it's our regime being changed. So I don't want to open the door to this might makes right law of the jungle nonsense. And everybody else except Dave, seemingly on the panel, is in favor of that. And
But America has a mechanism. Carl, hang on. America has a mechanism for regime change. It's called the election every 4 years. And the truth is, Americans had a good, long, hard look at.
You're making my point.
Well, no, I'm not.
This is my point.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I'm saying you live in a free democratic society with free democratic elections. That's why Trump won in 2016. That's why he lost in 2020, whatever he wants people to think. And that's why he won again in 2024. That is regime change, how it should happen.
We back 73% of the world's dictatorships. The idea that we say, here's the dictator we don't like, we're going to overthrow them, is ridiculous. By any objective standard, Netanyahu is worse than Maduro, and we're not overthrowing him. So the whole conversation is absurd. We're in no position to be the world police or the moral arbiters. In fact, Trump himself literally says, this is about the oil. It's about the natural resources. It's about stealing that for the corporations and the billionaires. So the whole conversation about,
I think it could be. I actually think I think Venezuela can be about a number of things at the same time. That's why I think nuance is an important factor in these things. It can be
but that's the
hang on, Kyle.
Can it just be pointed out?
It can be about oil. It can be about oil. It can be about Maduro being a gangster. It can be about
Piers,
a number of things.
This was sold to us.
Piers is a coward, bro.
Isn't it funny that we have this whole conversation, and while you're saying it could be about all these things, you know what no one's bringing up? Drugs. And that's what it was sold to us as.
Right.
Just like all these other wars, they just lie through their teeth. It has nothing to do with the drug problem, or
It's in
tiny
part about
fraction of it, and nothing to do with the fentanyl problem, which is the real crisis. It's a total pretext for war. And I got to say, man, by the way, I kind of agree with Michael on the concept of international law. But the thing about it is that this is totally illegal by our own law, by the Constitution of the United States of America, which
Dave
every
Smith
politician puts their hand on a Bible.
I don't think you could. It would be. I'll say this. I could never have imagined me say those words that Dave Smith is cooking. That's how terrible Trump has been for me to agree with what Dave Smith has to say. Let's rewind this because he's absolutely correct. Here we go.
Our own law, by the Constitution of the United States of America, which every politician puts their hand on a Bible and swears before all of us to God that they will do everything in their power to defend and execute. There was no imminent attack here. Donald Trump had all the time in the world to go to Congress and get permission for this, and he just didn't want to. And if you want to just say, like, by the way, Mike, it's funny because you point out I'm a libertarian or Kyle's a leftist. Ironically, we're the only ones taking the conservative position here on this. We are not an empire. Actually, the Supreme, yes, that's actually right. There's a long tradition. Do you know your history on this?
There's a long tradition of libertarians telling conservatives what we believe. No.
There's a long tradition of the best conservatives having the exact same foreign policy I do, and then a bunch of former communists who were atheists convinced you guys that it was right wing to support wars everywhere. By the way, the Monroe Doctrine.
Convinced Thomas Jefferson in 1801. I don't know about that.
No. I'm not talking about Barbary wars. Okay, anyway.
Or the Monroe administration, or the Roosevelt administration.
Do you even know what the Monroe Doctrine is? You say the Monroe Doctrine means that we get to run our hemisphere? No, it doesn't.
No,
the Monroe Doctrine.
Michael,
let me finish a thought, and then you can respond to it. No, that's not actually true. It meant that Europe couldn't have any more colonies here, and in turn, we wouldn't interfere in Europe. By the way, it's not a law. It's something a president said once in a speech, and it hasn't been the cornerstone of our foreign. It hasn't been. Have we not interfered in Europe? Have we not interfered in Europe for over 200 years? Is that what you're telling me, Michael?
And then we became the world empire.
Right, exactly. So we abandoned the Monroe Doctrine. We never followed it at all. And the Monroe Doctrine never said, they said that Europe couldn't establish more colonies. They already had several, but they couldn't establish more colonies. It didn't say that if there's a country that does a mineral deal with a country somewhere else because we won't allow our companies to do it with them, that therefore we can topple the leader. This is completely illegal by our own Constitution.
I'm happy to explain it. It's true. In 1823, the Soviet Union did not yet exist, and other adversaries around the world did not yet exist, we have expanded the notion that European powers, which were a threat to us, should not interfere in the Western Hemisphere to those other adversaries as well, who you recognize are adversaries. It seems to me where the big difference here on the panel is that you, Dave, at least will acknowledge that America has interests and there are bad regimes. You're making some crazy claims that the Constitution doesn't allow the United States to be commander-in-chief of the army. You're making a crazy claim that Congress.
No, I'm not. I'm saying it doesn't allow them to declare a war.
You're making a crazy claim that it was. Excuse me. You're making a crazy claim that it was somehow illegal to follow a court order.
Almost said, thank you, Dave hates his own race for some reason.
Anyway, you're making all sorts of crazy.
Is that how we do foreign policy? By
hold on one second,
order?
guys. 1 second. I'm happy to. The difference here is, Dave, you at least acknowledge America has interests, and you're saying because we sometimes make mistakes. Hold on 1 second. I'm just trying to get my point out. Because we sometimes make mistakes, you're saying that we should not pursue those interests, or you're saying that the consequences could be worse. The point that Kyle is making is actually different from yours. Kyle's point is that America has interests, and we should oppose those interests because he thinks that America is the savior.
No, I'm actually making an argument. Thank you for the straw man. I'm actually making an argument.
We're running a bit out of time.
Intelligence and foreign policy.
Hang on a second, Carl.
Thank you very much.
I think we've covered this well. I do want to move before we run out of time. I want to move to Minnesota, and I want to start with you, Coleman, if I may. This has been another huge story in the last week, and it goes to domestic law. It's, I think, a complex.
Yeah, Knowles is pretty bad faith. They're about to go over the Minnesota stuff. I'm curious to see, because typically, obviously, MAGA Dick Rider, I don't know. I'm unsure. Fake centrist, maybe. Dave Smith. Dave Smith is very, very like anti-intervention. So I don't know if he's going to differ from Knowles regarding something that happens domestically, but we'll see.
Story again that requires a nuanced view.
Those that hate Israel will be cursed by Israel. God himself said this. Base. And
I'll lay mine out, Coleman. Just for the record, I've watched this video talking exactly from every potential.
To be fair, Elisa, I do have it sped up, so they're a little bit faster. I have a 1.25 speed. To be fair,
angle. And it is my belief that it is utterly.
I'm thinking he probably is going to defend the ICE
what
agent
this
too,
woman, Renee Good, was doing as domestic
Read the
terrorism.
Bible or
I
find
see
out
somebody
later.
who got a little
God
panicky as
Israel
the ICE guys came towards her and decided to drive away, and that the ICE guy in front of her car, who coincidentally a few months earlier got dragged by a car.
Libertarian is
and had injuries.
I don't know. I feel like libertarians are pretty inconsistent.
I suspect will be a key part of this. He reacts in a equally panicky way and shoots her 3 times. And I don't see him as a cold-blooded murderer who did this deliberately as a way to murder somebody for the hell of it. I don't see her as a completely blameless part of this.
Like get chosen by the rapture, Vinny,
which led her down a path which I think were extremely unfortunate and, as it turned out, deadly for her. In other words, I think it's quite a complex story, which if you freeze frame it right down to every grab we've seen, anyone who thinks they have an absolute certainty about what happened here, I think is lying. And I think they're just, again, moving to the tribal place. This has to be this because my side believe this, or it has to be this because my side believe that. Am I wrong?
I couldn't agree more, Piers. I want to separate 2 issues really quickly. I'll get to the tragic death of Renee Good, but first I want to separate the issue of how ICE officers are behaving in Minnesota in general, right? Right now, social media is being flooded with videos of ICE officers needlessly escalating situations, questioning U.S. citizens who legally do not have to answer any questions. Some ICE officers seem to be under the impression that you're not allowed to film them. You are allowed to film them. And even, the worst part of this is that the Trump administration, the Department of Homeland Security, seems to have indicated to ICE officers that filming them is the same as doxing them, which it's not, right? So there is obviously, I think there's probably tons of ICE officers not getting videoed that are doing their jobs responsibly, and it's a tough job and it's a dangerous job, and I respect that. But there's a lot of ICE.
I don't respect ICE. I'm gonna be honest. I've lost a lot of respect for the organization at this point. But he is correct. You have the right to not answer questions. You have the right to fill them. All of them are within your right, for sure. 100%.
Officers that are just running roughshod over all of their responsibilities as officers, and they're being fanned on by the administration. I think that's really important to say up front, that that's a real phenomenon and needs to be talked about. Now, let's separate that from the issue of Renee Good, who was tragically killed by Jonathan Ross. Now, here, Piers, you're right to point out there are so many critiques of how this officer and his partner handled the situation. Why officers are trained not to be in front of
I'm definitely not a fan. I think it's very cowardly to hide your face as an ICE agent. If you want to do this job, then you better do it with pride. Otherwise, then you're a little bitch. Be honest, you're a little bitch.
car to begin with, right? That's one on a laundry list of ways in which this was terrible policing. However, a lot of prominent Democrats are saying that this is murder. Murder. That is a legal term with a legal standard. Now, if this goes to trial, it's likely to get removed to a federal court, which is going to be favorable for the officer. And what the jury is probably going to be instructed is if this officer had reason to believe he could have suffered bodily harm, he or his partner could have suffered serious bodily harm, then by statute, he's authorized to use deadly force. The jury is going to be instructed if he felt he was in serious danger. Now, we get the benefit of seeing 5 different angles on the video in slow motion over and over and over again. Yeah. So we can come to the conclusion that, yeah, he was out of he was out of line of the car during those second and third shots, but he didn't have that advantage. He experienced that in real time, in the blur of real life.
The reality is that this cop is not going to get in trouble. He's going to be let go scot-free for sure. I've already said this numerous times. I don't think I'm going to repeat it again. But what the guy did, she did not deserve to die. She should have listened to the federal agent. The whole idea that he felt like his life is in danger is bullshit. But obviously it is a quick situation. He felt panicked because he had PTSD apparently because of a past situation. All of it is fucked. This guy at the very least, at the bare minimum, should be told to sit down for a while at the bare minimum if he's going to be acting this erratic. So
whole interaction was less than 2 seconds, and he had one shot at it. Not only that, his partner had his hand through the window, which, as you said, is precisely the situation that had put him in the hospital 6 months prior. Yeah. It's going to be tough to convince a jury that he didn't have reason to believe he was in risk or his partner of serious.
I think from a legal perspective, I think you're probably right, and I think a jury may well end up making that determination based on the application of the law. But Kyle, I talked about both sides taking sort of implacable, incendiary positions. You compared ICE agents to Nazis, described the officer as an ICE thug who murdered a woman on camera by shooting her in the face. I mean, you're determining there that what we have watched with our own eyes, we got the benefit.
Hiding. No, because they're snipers. Well, different job entirely.
Seeing all the videos, is somebody making a deliberate calculation to murder that woman for no reason?
I think he did. And
Why would you do that?
Study the video closely. Well, I'll explain it to you. So first of all, these guys are all roided up freaks. Let's point that out. That these are like Proud Boys and white nationalists and the dregs of society who have now been given a gun and a badge.
Well, that's a ridiculous generalization. And again, I don't think that helps. Let me finish. That kind of generalization doesn't help your argument. It makes you sound.
I think Coleman had a relatively rational point. I'm guessing Kulinski is saying he's a cold-blooded murderer. I'm gonna guess Michael Noel is gonna say she deserved to die. I'm more just curious on Dave Smith's position, to be honest. Like, this position is very predictable. This position is very predictable. This position is just cold, hard, rational logic, I guess. There's really no take here. I'm curious on Dave Smith's position. He's going to give one? I don't really care about Kyle, because Kyle and Michael are going to say, like the obvious shit. What does Dave Smith have to say before I wrap up this video?
They're rounding up innocent people. They absolutely are Trump's Gestapo, and everybody knows it.
All right, let me bring in Dave Smith. Dave Smith, what's your view of this?
Well, I got to say, as much as it pains me to say, I really completely agreed with Coleman on that. I'm just kidding. I don't mind agreeing with Coleman. No, but I thought that was a very thoughtful take, and I think I agreed with all of that. I mean, look, this is a really tragic thing that happened. I don't think she was trying to run over the officer. It seemed to me that she was trying to peel out of there, and he got spooked and he shot her. And look, however you feel about this morally, the fact is that in the United States of America and just about every other government, if law enforcement has you there and telling you just can't peel out, I mean, it's just a really unwise move to try to drive your car away. And again, you can feel about that however you want to, much like the Iranians shooting rioters who they think are going to topple the government. Like, any government's going to shoot rioters that are trying to topple that government, including ours. And however you feel about it, that's the way states work. I do think there's like a broader thing that I would really think that Trump supporters, right-wingers in this country might want to think about. And I say this as someone who's I'm a real immigration restrictionist. I mean, to me,
immigration restriction. Let's see if Dave Smith's about to get a very base take. Are we gonna start being able to respect Dave Smith a little bit? It sounds like a pretty base take so far. Kyle said some on his stuff too. I'm a liberal, so when they talk about Luigi and how he's a hero, I don't agree with all of that. I don't agree with that. Luigi is a cold-blooded murderer. There's just no fucking way you call this guy a hero, regardless of how you feel about health insurance companies who deserve a lot of criticism. We can't advocate for like vigilantes. That's ridiculous. That's fucking ridiculous in every way. Everyone is the way to go if you want progress. Generally, I'm in for like certain liberal principles and certain conservative principles. It's just a head or it's just like what are we talking about? Her stupid girlfriend should be in jail. Base facts, cooking. You're a genius. You know ball.
Don't think everyone in the world has a right to enter the United States of America.
Why
I think
don't
that the
you want
American people have a right to take
That's
in
just a
whoever we
stupid
want or
question,
whoever
Alan.
we don't want in the same way that I think that Trump supporters, right wingers in this country might want to think about. And I say this as someone who's I'm a real immigration restrictionist. I mean, to me, that I don't think everyone in the world has a right to enter the United States of America. I think that the American people have a right to take in whoever we want or whoever we don't want in the same way that I have a right to, have whoever I want at my house for any reason that I choose to. And so anybody who's here illegally, I think we have a right to remove them. But I do think you got to start to ask some real questions about what type of juice we're getting for this type of squeeze and real questions of what we're doing to our own neighborhoods here. I mean, you really do have a situation, as Coleman kind of outlined, where like masked federal agents are kind of acting like thugs, pulling out guns in suburban neighborhoods in front of, and for all of this, for this big show of force that is such a provocation of the radical left in this country and getting them out on the streets. I've seen the Trump administration says 10 million illegals came in under Joe Biden. I've seen estimates that are north of 30 million illegals totally in the country. And for all of this, we're talking about getting like a couple 100,000 of them. So in other words, we're not even making a dent on the real problem. And yet we are like, doing something where more incidents like this are more and more likely. And I got to say, and I appreciate even that Michael said, like, there's a tragic thing, but I'm sure he saw too, some of like the ghoulish response from so many right wingers, like on Twitter and stuff, celebrating.
And you know what? It reminded me,
and
you know what, Dave, it reminded me of the reaction from the left.
I hate Piers sometimes. Like, I hate Piers most of the time. Ain't no way Dave Smith, who's a known person who leans right, who's not a fan of illegal immigrants, was giving a legitimate, nuanced, thought-out take and talking about, I do think we need to get rid of illegal immigrants. There's a lot of differences. Like, there's some things that I don't agree with in terms of how people perceive illegal immigrants. But okay, we have to get rid of illegal immigrants. That is his take. That is his take. But he's giving a nuanced take on how the right is praising and glorifying the death of this woman. And Piers Morgan's automatic reaction, but the left. Oh my God. Like, Piers is such a MAGA agent. He keeps on talking about, well, people are not really understanding the nuance, and there's this tribalist mindset. When you are one of the worst aspects of a fake centrist that pushes the MAGA narrative, this is a situation where you practice what you fucking preach, you little hypocrite. Where Dave Smith gave a reasonable take, being rational about, hey man, he was rattled, he was shooting, that's just how it works. He wasn't even being pro Renee Good. But this is one criticism with the right and how they're behaving. You immediately defend them. Piers, get a fucking grip. Look in the fucking mirror. Practice what you fucking preach, you hypocrite. Jesus Christ, bro. Like, I don't even agree with everything that he's saying, but at least I can respect the fact that he's giving a nuanced take. Piers Morgan is just defend MAGA at all times. Fuck. You think Piers Morgan gets a hard on anytime he thinks about Trump in the bed? Like, Jesus Christ, man. What are we talking about? He's all up the ass of the Royals as well. That shows you what he's about. Hey man, it's cooked. Liberal conservative, whatever we need: manufacturing jobs, housing, immigrant restrictions, and geopolitical policy of trade and peace. Immigrant restrictions, I would say reformed immigration policy. I don't think immigration is bad. I think it's fine to have strict immigration. If you want it to be where it's like you have to meet a certain threshold to come into the country, like we can compromise there. Like you need to have this level of knowledge. You need to have this amount of like American pride. You need to provide these skills. We can probably compromise there. Like I understand that. But at the very least, we should agree on, if that is the case, we make it harder in terms of being qualified to be an American, whatever the fuck that means. We need to make the process more streamlined. It shouldn't take 20 to 50 years for people to become Americans. If they meet all the thresholds, they pass certain checks, we give them background check, they're not a criminal, they're here for America, they can work immediately, they should just be able to become a citizen sooner. That's just like at least we can meet in the middle there. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. Trump sucks. He's an asshole. He's indeed an asshole. You are cooking. It's already super tough for people to get an American visa. 100%. It's already tough, Patty. I'm there with you. I think people don't realize how tough it is to get all these things. It's just most Americans don't fucking respect America. That includes the right, by the way. The right and the left. A lot of Americans don't know jack shit about like politics or the government. Why go to the U.S. if you're filthy and rich? Does USA matter at this point? At this point, I don't know. Hard to say. I mean, they're cutting taxes for the rich, so I guess that's something. We have no jobs. I mean, we have jobs. We just have a lot of jobs that people don't want. A lot of people do not want to work at farms. That's a lot. That's like that is the sector that is losing the most not illegal, just most immigrants is the agricultural sector. Americans don't want to work on farms. It's just truth.
To Charlie Kirk's murder.
Yeah,
right? There was just a complete. There was not just
it's a different situation.
Not just an absence. Well, I would say look, different things, but not just an absence of basic empathy and humanity, but a willful, gleeful celebration of somebody's death, right? And in both cases, I don't think either person deserved to die. Is just my gut feeling about it. So at the very least, even if you do think she brought the situation on herself, and I certainly don't think she was blameless in her decision-making leading up to what happened, to the confrontation, but even if you believe that, to then sort of gleefully celebrate, she had it coming, she deserved it, but she's a mother of a young kid, and she, is not even 40 years old. So what have we become as this?
It's easy for illegals, hard for skilled immigrants. That's not true. And most of the immigrants that I'm talking about are immigrants with visas. They had work visas. So these are immigrants that are allowed to be here. So those are not illegal immigrants. I'm done with this. Let's move on to the next video.